Good morning. I first want to say I'm from New York City. I naturally talk fast, but I got a lot of information, so I'm going to talk really fast, so buckle in. It should be fun. I am Erica Andreessen of EaaS Consulting, which stands for Erica as a Service, because you get me and my expertise. I basically prevent business owners from murdering their business by helping them secure their assets with a plan so they can survive disasters and disruptions and survive in the aftermath of flood. So Sean already told you a little bit about me. I am many things. I'm a recovering attorney. I used to do corporate law, then I did the JAG course. I'm also a veteran. I'm a professor of emergency management at the graduate level for the University of Texas in El Paso, and I am also a certified business continuity professional. So check it out, something you all can relate to. Every morning you wake up and you have to go outside, what do? You check your weather app. You figure out how you're going to dress, what time you're going to leave, what are the best optimal conditions in order for you to achieve your goals successfully with the least amount of discomfort. That is basically business continuity in a nutshell. Also, in 2016, when I was in Afghanistan, I was reading a Business Review article on some rare off time, and a lot of business owners were interviewed who suffered with Superstorm Sandy, and they were asked a whole lot of questions, and the final question was, how are you preparing for next time? And almost every single one of them said, oh, this isn't going to happen again. It's like, no. So, international corporations, big companies, critical infrastructure companies, the federal government, higher education institutions, healthcare facilities, they all do business continuity. The one absence is mid and small size companies because they don't know. There's no barrier to entry other than not knowing about business continuity. So risk management will only mitigate a risk. It will not eradicate a risk. You can never get that risk down to 0%. So business continuity picks up where risk management fails. Also, insurance will transfer the financial liability of a risk. You still have to deal with the risk. So think about being in a car accident. You're not made whole instantly once you're like, oh, I have insurance for that. You have to wait until the inconvenience. So at the end of the day, what business continuity is, you go through multiple step processes to figure out what your most valuable assets are to keep your business running, to make sure you don't have a single point of failure. Also, you go through a risk analysis for your risks, threats, and vulnerabilities, and then a business impact analysis. And part of that is figuring out what your vital operations are. So if you are without these specific things, you are pretty much dead in the water, you cease to exist. And there's a thing called a recovery time objective, an RTO. So you figure out what your priorities are, and you may think you have 3 priorities. One of them, you can be down for half an hour, and then you're dead. If you're down on the third one for 14 hours, then you're dead, and then 8 hours in the middle. The 14-hour one's not that important at that point, so you want to focus your resources to the 30-minute, and then anything slightly above 30 minutes, up to 8 hours. At the end of the day, you want to be flexible, not brittle, as a business. And so you look at what these reasons, they have all these failure percentages. People want to dial in their marketing, they want to dial in their sales, their product. That's fine. Even if you have all that dialed in, more than 50% of businesses who suffer a disaster disruption will never recover. And a disruption, like Sean said, could be something like a critical piece of machinery stops working, your supply chain has issues. It could be cyber attack, it could be natural disasters. It's like. So I wrote a book, he talked about the book. It's very, very casual in the way I talk about it. I don't use a lot of industry terms unless I have to. Music theme, every chapter is a song, the lyrics forecast that. So we got Rolling Stones, David Bowie, Wu-Tang Clan, 9 Inch Nails, Earth, Wind & Fire, U2, Foo Fighters, It's fine. So I was asked, can a business owner be everything and everywhere all at once? And I said, yes, I can, because my fingerprint imparts itself on everybody that I educate and empower. So business owners can keep their dream alive, which means they're providing a service to the community, which means the community has their lives completely enhanced. Their employees are making money, which means they can afford to pay for the things they need to, plus also spend money on things for other services from other companies and so on. So I'm teaching business owners how to fish, not just a great recipe slide. These are things, this is how I do it. Here's your return on investment. I have a HERO 12-week program, which is having your emergencies and resiliency optimized. It's limited to 10 clients per session. There's 5 throughout the year. One is starting Monday, another one is March 20th. There is some tailored engagement. I will also review a plan if you already have one to make sure it's optimized. You need to have a business continuity plan exercised, and because I have all this experience in military running and facilitating exercises, I can do that for you. And the lowest entry point is you can buy the book on Kindle for $5, $20 on paperback. There is a worksheet at the end to help you build a rudimentary business continuity plan. It'll move the needle significantly if you don't have anything. So one of the important things people talk about putting cash in the registers of BIPOC or women or small business owners, and that is going to be really important if you have a business continuity plan, so at least you have the register that still opens. Next. You're also going to be able to grow. So every type of business owner can do this. A solopreneur who is a cupcakery in France, she has her own company, runs out of her home, and she and I did some business continuity. She thought, oh, I can't do this until I grow. I was like, hold my beer, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. She's like, oh, wow, there's a lot of stuff I need to do. And when she actually implemented them, she's like, you know, it's funny, I thought I couldn't use business continuity until I grew, but I realized I cannot grow until I did business continuity. Next. I get my revenue from my book residuals, which sells consistently every month, speaking engagements, and then also whatever my client interaction is next. My marketing is social media, so I have both personal and business on LinkedIn. @Don't Kill Your Business is my handle for Instagram and TikTok. Let's see. I have a blog on the website. I do compensated and free speaking engagements. That's how I get my people. And then the book, and also I'm an expert according to these publications. Excuse me, next. This is my problem. Finding my audience has been a slow roll to actually get in front of medium and small sized business owners. So finding them is one thing. The second problem I have, and I'm curious to do market research amongst business owners, what would cause you to do something proactively instead of reactively? I can make a lot of arguments about why you should, but it's really up to you because you're the ones that I would be potentially selling to. Next. And that's it. Thank you.
So now we're on time, so that's very great. I also want to mention one thing too. You know, we had polled people when they first applied, asking them where they were at in their business, and we mentioned that in the newsletter. Erica's actually progressed a good deal beyond that. She's got some clients now, so things are really rocking. I actually want to start with a question, just to get a better sense of this. Like, what are maybe 2 or 3 or 4 examples of the kinds of contingencies you help businesses deal with, like a natural disaster or supply chain? Or...
All of it. So one of them, a more recent person, she's an Etsy shop owner, and she makes things out of crystals. So it's really important to her and her business and her mission that she has ethically sourced real crystals. So she searched far and wide to get this one supplier, but then she realized after talking, she only has one supplier. And that's the thing, you can have a solo or a single supplier. One of them is a choice, one of them is an option. They're not the only people who have ethically sourced crystals. So she's like, you know, I realized I had to go find it now while I had the time and I didn't have to rush to find an alternative. So if that person, that supplier, for whatever reason, because they have their own supply chain issues, because they're in Texas and maybe they get flooded, they can't get their product to her in time for her to make her stuff, she has another person backed up so she can seamlessly continue her business.
Other questions?
Hi, thanks for your presentation and the questions you gave. I know a lot of businesses, especially small businesses and early businesses, struggle to kind of find their lane, or they have multiple revenue sources they're trying to investigate. Before they've gotten certainty on their kind of core business, would you still recommend kind of working with you to try and find their kind of ways that could go wrong, or is it better to kind of have their business kind of lane developed and defined before working with you?
Okay, I'm gonna make an analogy. I run marathons, and when I was living in El Paso, Texas, it gets hot there. So if I had not run multiple marathons and done all the training before to know how my body works, I would have just gone out at 10 o'clock in the morning and started a 13-mile run, which would have been disastrous. Either I would have had a heat stroke, or I just would have been miserable and not completed it. I think at any point in your business, you can do business continuity. It's never too late to learn what you wish you knew earlier, but I believe there's a good synergy when you're writing your business plan to also be doing a business continuity plan, because if you get that practice in early, and it needs to be a practice. If you have a plan, good for you. It's a paperweight, okay? That's why you need to practice it, so it becomes muscle memory. You know that it actually works. So I believe everybody from the start, because why would you handicap yourself in the beginning?
We mentioned crystals and cupcakes. I'm all in for that. But is there a particular type of client that is ideal for you to work with, or do you have a target industry for the small and mid-sized businesses you talked about?
I don't have a target industry. It's any business owner, and I said I like to work with mid to small size because they're the ones who need it. I mean, I could work with a larger size, but there's enough competition in that most large ones already have it. They don't just have a plan; they have a program. And if it's a large company, they call it enterprise resiliency. It's the same thing. I'm also working with. I have a meeting today with a venture capitalist because I also believe if you are a venture capitalist and you want to ensure that your product and your investment is secured, you might want to make it a condition of investment that you also have a business continuity plan, so it's another layer of protection.
Great, thank you. Over here. Okay, so hi Erica. Hi. So very impressive presentation. One comment you asked about how can you reach, because I just had an idea, if you had a panel of business fails, like business breakdowns, and several businesses that were willing to share their breakdowns, and you didn't know about it, and maybe how on the spot, like how if they had implemented continuity in your services, how they could have avoided that. Like I would be really interested in the breakdowns that businesses have, and that. And then so, and another question would be, could you give us an example of a business where they made an investment with you, and maybe how much that was, and then how much they might have saved or benefited from that afterwards?
I cannot do that just yet because I'm a year and 4 months old. And I just started getting clients, and thankfully they've not been tested yet. I do have examples, case studies from my mentor. He worked with a pharmaceutical company in Puerto Rico when Hurricane Maria hit, and because he had said to them, you need a safety supply stock. So they had places off the island throughout the United States where they had a safety supply. So while most other pharmaceuticals, there are a lot of pharmaceutical companies on the island of Puerto Rico, were out for a month or more, his company was down for 4 days because they were able to continue because of the safety supply stock. And that's something even the cupcakery, I asked her, I was like, do you have a safety supply stock of icing? It's not, you can scale down or scale up any of the tactics that you use. So she's like, no, I don't. And I'm like, it's not even just your power goes out and you can't make icing today. It's like, what if your daughter has to go to the emergency room? Are you going to make that judgment? Am I going to fulfill an order? Or am I going to take my kid to the emergency room? Business continuity allows you to have the freedom to do both.
Just curious, how much of your interaction with your clients is virtual versus in person?
At this point, a lot of it is, almost all of it is virtual. I am having one, he's coming in on the 19th of April, and we're meeting in person. He's having me review his current continuity plan. He has a business that's in Moore County, North Carolina, so they had been impacted when the power stations were vandalized. So he thought he had a good plan, and he's like, I don't know now. So,
Hey, thanks for the presentation.
thank you.
I think if you haven't been on podcasts, you ought to, because you've got a great story and you've got really unique information. It strikes me as that education is one of your biggest needs in getting to your audience, just based on the ask that you have. Wondering, especially from your military experience, are you doing any simulation education, meaning putting a class into a simulation where they're running a business and then having all kinds of issues?
So that is a good idea. I'm not at that level yet, not that I can't do it. So one of the places, my certifying body is the Disaster Recovery Institute. Their big annual conference is in Austin at the end of this month. I'm an invited speaker, and one of my buddies, he is the continuity expert at Netflix. They are running a simulation there because they have the resources to do that, and but that is something I would like to do. But I know also like your wonderful idea of having failed businesses, and I need to find the people who are willing to come forward and play in that regard. So that's another thing that it's been, when I wrote my thing at the beginning of October, and I didn't have an audience, I didn't have clients. Let me tell you, publishing a book really skyrockets. It's a business card on steroids, but it definitely assisted me greatly with getting out there. People are like, oh, you want to speak for us? Sure. Before that, it was like, you want to speak with us? Maybe. We'll see. I don't know. So there's that.
The need, I think, is definitely there. Going to your question of how do you get business owners to be proactive, you know, looking back at my career in the mid-2000s, our office here in Nashville got burned from a arson, so that's an unexpected call to get Wednesday before Thanksgiving. Years later, I was asked to take over a business, become a partner, so trying to inherit a business that so much in continuity was with their parties and content, with whatever it may be. And then recently, the same thing happened. A company asked me to come in and take a failing property that they had purchased. And so much of their assets had not transferred over from the purchase. And it's a massive company that was, you know, not looking at every detail. So a huge need. I think going back to the days of, you know, really being high growth, struggling small business, and you go from, you know, yourself to 5 employees to 15, you know, you're at that point, you know, not making these big expenditures. And most entrepreneurs, when they go through that first high growth, there's so much that they perceive to be dependent on them, right? Especially if you start out as a one or two person shop. So I think if the conversation was, hey, all this stuff you're going to go through, like, hey, we want you to pay this fee and have this significant time spent doing it, I probably still would be like, I don't have the time or the money. So, but certainly bought insurance. I certainly had programs as a business owner that were monthly, like, you know, as you, and maybe you already do this, but the idea of making more of a subscription-based service, where the nut even was still significant, but when you're in your bank account, spread that over a 12-month cycle. So they almost look at it like insurance. I know it's a completely different thing, but I do look back at me and go, oh my God, it's like I just hired another employee, like I can't spend any more money, any significant money. So I think that's what's going to be a change in that mindset.
Right, which is what, you know, when I originally had this idea, I was very pie in the sky. I only wanted to help mom and pop shops. But then I realized through my market research, they're either not interested or they have no money for it, which is why aside from the business card on steroids and writing the book, I wrote the book for them, so at least they can think about it and get a leg up. But if you're going to be spending, and this is also a fact from FEMA emergency management, every dollar spent on the front end saves you $7 on the back end. So would you rather have the position of you're spending the money and doing the things when it's on your terms versus on somebody else's or some disaster's terms? Because it's going to be a lot more expensive, it's going to be a lot more stressful, and you would have lost a lot in the process. So there's that argument to be made. I know people buy when they're in pain, and a lot of times you have a recency model. So after a hurricane, people are like, oh crap, I got to get this done. And the same thing with emergency management. Citizens are not demanding their politicians to do emergency management, mitigation, and preparedness until after there's a disaster. And it shouldn't be that way, because and the people who, like that one guy, there's that one guy when the hurricane that hit Florida, his house was the only one that stood. Everybody else got knocked down because he did a lot of construction mitigation measures. I can get into the building industries and why they don't. Their claimed reason is that they think it's a barrier of entry for certain contractors to come in and have to have all the codes built up to really good hurricane standards. The truth of the matter is they're always going to pass it down to the customer anyway, and more often than not, the customer's looking to pay to make sure they have a house standing. Like that extra $5,000 or $10,000 we're already spending, $200 plus, like come on. So I believe, I appreciate it is hard. I understand it's hard to justify spending on something that may not happen. But just think of the relief that you would have even to your shareholders or your stakeholders, if you have any, of being like, we handle this, and it was just a bobble, if anything, and we're not out of business. And you know, do you want to stay in business or not? And the only thing that's harder than making a business continuity plan is explaining why you didn't.
Thank you. So thanks for the presentation first. So I had a question about that. The dollar spent is $7 saved. I guess, how do you think about the return on investment? Or do you have any models or frameworks, given that a lot of these events are inherently random and might not have a probability that can be assigned to them?
So what I say for a lot of people with continuity plans, you say your subscription model, that's thinking in my head, that's kind of difficult because every business is unique. So if you have one location, I will not advise you, like say you're in Chicago, I'm not going to advise you on hurricanes. There's no reason to. Because by the time a hurricane reaches the Chicago area, it is a depressed storm, if anything, right? So no matter what your location, even if you have here, and then you also have a location in Texas, you have completely different considerations. So there's the whole aspect of really dialing in specific and tailoring and creating a bespoke continuity plan for everybody. So you're not wasting money on things that may not happen. I've known for a while that there is issues in Texas with not seismology for earthquakes from fracking. And they just, in the western part of the state, has not been a problem. And I was giving a lecture the night before Thanksgiving, and I was like, well, I'm not going to talk about earthquakes here. It was in El Paso, and they were like, well, we just had an earthquake last week. I said, really? And they said, yeah. So then I was asked at the end, should we do some kind of earthquake preparations? I said, yes. And they go, well, why? I go, why not? And they go, we don't really get them. I said, you just told me you did. Right? And then literally the next day, they had 2 more earthquakes. So, and this is the thing that emergency managers will joke about, is it's like, yes, this happened, there's going to be a next time, and it's probably going to be worse. So you got Superstorm Sandy, now all of a sudden subways are flooding in New York City because of rain. It doesn't even need to be superstorm. Things are getting worse, and it's smart, and the money that people are investing, like in Miami, they're putting up a seawall, spending millions and millions of dollars to do this. By the time they get it done, the sea level will have risen so much that it's not even going to be effective. So that's government spending. I'm sorry, I have a soapbox, I'm going to get long.
Well, on that happy note, thank you, Erica.